The security footage haunts me to this day. Our HOA president pressing an electric cattle prod against the body of my 9-year-old disabled daughter as she screamed in pain. All because Emma's therapy toys were ruining the neighborhood aesthetic. What I saw next changed everything. Before watching, full story comment below. From where you watching? Also like and subscribe for more. Karen's cruelty stories. The security footage made my stomach turn. There was Mrs. Dobson, our HOA president, knowingly pressing an electric cattle prod against my 9-year-old daughter Emma's shoulder as she sat helpless in our front yard. Emma's face contorted in pain as 5,000 volts coursed through her small body. All because her therapeutic sensory toys were spoiling the neighborhood aesthetic. I warned you 3 times about this mess, Mrs. Dobson sneered at Emma, who could not even respond through her tears. Maybe now you'll learn to keep your junk inside where no one has to look at it. Emma has a neurological condition that hinders her motor functions and speech. The multicolored sensory balls and texture boards scattered on our lawn blanket were a part of her doctor-ordered therapy. I was inside retrieving her water bottle when I heard her shriek. By the time I made it outside, Mrs. Dobson was standing over my trembling daughter, cattle prod still in hand. Your daughter needs to follow the same rules as everyone else, she said icily when she spotted me. No exceptions. The burn on Emma's shoulder was already developing an angry red welt that would soon blister. Emma was hyperventilating, her eyes wide with confusion and betrayal. She couldn't comprehend why the woman who always smiled at us in community meetings had suddenly heard her. I called 911 immediately. The officers who responded were shocked when I presented them with our doorbell camera footage. It clearly showed Mrs. Dobson walking up to Emma saying something to her, then intentionally pressing the electric prod on her shoulder when Emma didn't react immediately. Sir, this is felony assault on a disabled minor, the officer said quietly. We're arresting her right now. Mrs. Dobson was yelling about property values and community standards when they led her off in handcuffs. She was claiming Emma was faking her disability and just needed discipline for breaking HOA rules. The emergency room doctor documented a second-degree electrical burn on Emma's shoulder. This will likely leave a permanent scar, he told me grimly, both physical and emotional. That night, Emma wouldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she'd jolt awake screaming, "No shock, no shock." I held her until morning, tears streaming down my face, overcome with guilt for not protecting her. I uploaded the security footage to our neighborhood social media group that evening. Within hours, it had been shared thousands of times. News vans lined our street by morning. What happened next restored my faith in humanity. Neighbors we'd barely spoken to came with cards, meals, and gifts for Emma. Parents organized a community safety workshop for children with disabilities. The mayor himself visited to promise a full investigation into HOA overreach. 3 days later, an emergency HOA meeting was called. The community center was packed with angry residents demanding accountability. Mrs. Dobson's husband tried to defend her, saying she'd been provoked by repeated infractions. Then my elderly neighbor, Mr. Rodriguez, stood up, leaning heavily on his cane. I've watched that little girl struggle to pick up her toys every day, he said, his voice shaking with emotion. She drops them 20 times but won't give up. Meanwhile, this woman motioned toward Mrs. Dobson's empty chair. Her perfectly manicured lawn has more compassion than she does. The room erupted into applause. The board voted unanimously to remove Mrs. Dobson and implement new protection policies for residents with disabilities. The district attorney charged Mrs. Dobson with felony assault on a disabled minor child endangerment and civil rights violations. She eventually pleaded to a deal of 6 months in jail, mandatory anger management, and 500 hours of community service at a disability resource center. But our nightmare wasn't yet over. Emma developed severe anxiety around strangers. She wouldn't go outside for weeks. Her physical therapist said animal therapy might be what she needed to heal. That's when our community really came through. A fundraiser to get Emma a service dog raised $15,000 in 3 days. 6 months later, Buddy, a specially trained golden retriever, became Emma's constant companion and protector. The day Mrs. Dobson was released from jail, she found her house surrounded by hundreds of colorful sensory toys placed by neighbors in silent protest. The for sale sign went up the next day. We thought this chapter of our lives was finally closing, but 2 weeks after Mrs. Dobson's release, I received a threatening letter from her attorney. She was suing us for defamation and emotional distress, alleging the video had been doctored to make her appear in a bad light. I showed the letter to Mr. Rodriguez, who had become like family to us. His face darkened as he read it. "Don't worry, hon," he said. "My niece is a civil rights attorney. She'll take your case." The following day, Maria Rodriguez heard our case and agreed to represent us pro bono. Mrs. Dobson doesn't know what she's getting herself into. She told me she's seen a disabled child on camera. No jury will believe her. Maria countersued for harassment and emotional distress. The evidence was damning. Not only our security cameras, but testimony from several neighbors detailing Mrs. Dobson's pattern of picking on vulnerable residents 2 days before our court date. Mrs. Dobson's lawyer called Maria. They wanted to settle. Mrs. Dobson would drop the lawsuit, pay for Emma's future therapy, and agree to a permanent restraining order if we dismissed our countersuit. "It's your decision," Maria said. "We could go to trial and win more likely, but it would also put Emma at risk of having to testify." The thought of my daughter having to relive her experience on the witness stand made the decision easy. We accepted the settlement. That winter was fine. Emma continued to have nightmares. The scar on her shoulder was still red and angry. She would not wear short sleeves, even indoors. Buddy was a comfort, but recovery was slow and painful. Her therapist recommended a specialized trauma program at a children's hospital in the neighboring state. It was expensive, nearly $30,000 for the 6-week program, but our neighbors rallied again. A benefit concert, bake sales, and an online campaign raised the money in less than a month. The program worked wonders. Specialists used play therapy, art therapy, and animal therapy to help Emma work through her trauma. By week 4, she was sleeping through the night. By week 6, she could talk about what had happened without having a panic attack. When we returned home, Emma wanted to do something for the community that had rallied around us. "Can we help other kids like me?" she asked one night. That's how the Emma's Advocates Foundation was born. With Maria's legal help, we established a nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting children with disabilities from discrimination and abuse. We started small, just a website and a hotline, but word spread quickly. A year after the incident, we received a call from a family in a neighboring town. Their autistic son was being targeted by their HOA for his sensory equipment in their backyard. The president of that HOA, Mrs. Dobson's sister, they're cut from the same cloth, the boy's mother told me. She just keeps saying our son's therapy equipment is an eyesore and threatening to fine them every week. Maria took their case immediately. This time we were prepared. We had documents, court cases, and a support system. The case never even reached court. The HOA backed off the moment Maria penned her first letter. That fall, Emma returned to school full-time with Buddy by her side. Her teacher created a special presentation about service animals and disability rights. Emma, once too shy to give voice in class, stood proudly beside Buddy as her classmates learned how to greet them. "Sometimes bad things happen so we can learn how to help others," she told her class. It was a wisdom no child should have to learn so painfully. On the 1-year anniversary of what we now just call the incident, our neighborhood dedicated a new play, ground designed to be usable by children of all abilities. They named it Emma's Place and put up a plaque there in Han, or of courage in the face of cruelty and community in the face of division. During the dedication ceremony, Emma surprised everyone by asking to speak. With Buddy by her side, she stepped forward to the microphone. "Thank you for being nice when someone was mean," she said simply. "My hurt is getting better because of you." There wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. As Emma's foundation grew, we began receiving messages from families around the country with similar stories. Hate or HOA harassment of disabled residents wasn't isolated. It was a pattern. Maria developed her practice to focus on such cases, and we set up a network of volunteer attorneys to help those families who couldn't afford representation. 2 years after the incident, Emma was invited to testify before a state legislative hearing on HOA regulations. At 11 years old, she was the youngest witness to ever testify. "My name is Emma Davis," she began with Buddy sitting faithfully beside her. "When I was 9, a woman harmed me because my disability made her uncomfortable. She thought her right to a perfectly looking neighborhood was more valuable than my right to be in public." The room fell quiet as Emma told them what had happened. Then she revealed to them a photograph of her scarred shoulder. "This mark will never go away," she said, "but it reminds me every day that I need to safeguard other children like me." The legislature approved Emma's law 6 months later. It prohibited HOAs from discriminating against residents with disabilities and provided harsh penalties for violations. Similar bills were soon introduced in nearby states. In the meantime, Mrs. Dobson had moved into a small apartment in another city. We learned through mutual friends that she'd lost friends, her reputation, and ultimately her marriage. Her husband divorced her soon after she got out of jail, unable to tolerate the community's judgment. I never wanted her destruction. Justice, yes, but not vengeance. When Emma's therapist suggested that forgiveness might be a part of her healing process, I struggled with the idea. How could I forgive someone who had tried to hurt my child on purpose? But Emma, with her innate wisdom, knew something I didn't. Keeping anger towards her all the time is like drinking poison. She said, "It hurts me more than it hurts her." For the third anniversary of the incident, Emma wrote Mrs. Dobson a letter. She didn't send it. That wasn't the point. The actual act of putting down her anger and then letting it go was what was crucial. "I'm not angry anymore," she said after she put the letter in an envelope. "I just want to help people," and she has. Emma's foundation has now helped over 50 families fight discriminatory HOA policies. She's spoken at schools and community centers on disability rights. The scar on her shoulder has healed to a faint white scar, but her determination never has. Last month, Emma received an award from the governor for her advocacy efforts. As she stood on stage with Buddy, I reflected on how far we'd come. Sometimes the worst day of your life can lead to the most important work of your life, Emma said in her acceptance speech. "I wouldn't wish what happened to me on anyone, but I'm grateful for what came after, all the helpers, all the kind people, and all the kids we've been able to help." As we left the ceremony, Emma tugged at my arm. "Dad," she said, "I want to be a lawyer like Maria when I grow up." "You'll make a great lawyer," I told her. "I want to defend children who can't defend themselves," she continued, "and maybe one day people like Mrs. Dobson will learn that being different is not something to fear or punish." That night, as I stood looking at Emma sleeping peacefully with Buddy wrapped protectively at her feet, I knew that something incredible had happened. A horrific act meant to silence my daughter had instead given her a powerful voice, not just for herself, but for so many others. The electric shock from Mrs. Dobson's cattle prod lasted only seconds, but the ripples of change it caused continue to radiate, touching lives far outside our neighborhood, showing that even the darkest moments can give birth to unexpected light.